The commodification of fear. Fear is a natural response to a dangerous situation, natural and useful. I always return to the image of encountering a lion out in the open in the Serengeti. Be afraid, be very afraid. Fear triggers the fight-flight impulse, which is clearly a survival mechanism. It releases all kinds of chemicals into the bloodstream, including adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, glucose, endorphins, and dopamine. All of this prepares us physiologically to either stand and fight or to run away. Interestingly, some of these chemicals are actually feel-good hormones like endorphins, dopamine, and adrenaline. I think this is why we do things to deliberately make ourselves afraid, like watching horror movies, riding roller coasters, and climbing mountains. I guess we can become addicted to these things, and all the time we have to be increasing the danger level in order to get the same level of benefit from all these chemicals introduced into our bloodstream. But this kind of intense, acute fear response is not at all a bad thing. I've enjoyed my fair share of horror movies and roller coasters over the years, though for the most part I have avoided dangerous mountains. However, fear can become a chronic situation, and we tend then to talk about anxiety rather than fear. This is a more diffuse and pervasive feeling, which can provoke the release of many of these same chemicals into our bloodstream. Unfortunately, they're not able to be used and dissipated as they were intended to be in the face of an acute threat. They just sit there eating away at us. I entitled this video The Commodification of Fear, and I've already referred to some of the ways in which our fear response can be used to make money for other people. Scary movies, theme park rides, adventure holidays. People who make money from these things are selling fear. They're selling the experience of fear. I have no real problem with that if that's your thing. However, there are other ways in which fear is used as a commodity. Think of all those people out there selling you things that will protect you from various real or imagined threats. There are all sorts of security systems for your home. There are safer vehicles. You can buy this pendant to protect you from your computer and mobile phone. Fear sells things, getting you to imagine a threat and then to sell you a useless product to protect you from that same threat. Capitalism at its very best. I've often wondered if the people who sell computer security software have people out back creating the very threats they then sell you protection from. But it doesn't have to be anything shonky or wacky like this. It doesn't have to be a manufactured fear. I've already mentioned things like security systems, safer cars, and so on. These are protecting you or offering to protect you from very real potential risks. The sales pitch works, of course, because they're able to greatly exaggerate the actual extent of the risk, the extent of the threat. But isn't it worth taking precautions, even if the risk is very small, is exactly what they get you to think. Of course, it's certainly worth it for them. One of the biggest industries built on the basis of fear is the insurance industry. You need this just in case. I've never had private health insurance. Honestly, I don't think you really need it here in Australia, though occasionally it might offer some convenience. On balance, I don't think the huge financial output required is worth the potential benefit. I know that will be different in other countries where they don't have great public health care. In that situation, of course, companies selling health insurance will make gazillions off your fear. I'm not advocating that you never take the necessary and practical steps to ensure your safety. However, just bear in mind that this is probably not the same as the level of care and protection that these companies are trying to sell you. Whatever they're trying to sell you, you almost certainly need much less of it. One other way in which fear is commodified, of course, is in politics. In this case, the return on the investment in fear is not money. Well, it's probably that too, but it's mainly power, control. It's easier to control and manipulate a fearful population than one that feels safe and secure. You have to keep the population off balance and therefore dependent on you. One of the tactics employed by a narcissistic abuser is to create an atmosphere of constant uncertainty. Narcissists are known for creating an environment where the victim feels perpetually uncertain and off balance. This might involve unpredictable reactions, sudden mood changes, or inconsistent treatment. You may be left constantly anxious and unsure, which makes you more susceptible to further narcissistic manipulation and control. The goal of politicians often seems to be somewhat similar to this, particularly at election time. Religion can be another sphere in which fear is commodified. First, create the perceived threat, then offer the one and only solution. Again, it's much easier to control and manipulate your congregation if they're afraid. A lot of people stand to benefit from your being afraid. Fear is difficult terrain to navigate. Obviously, there are real threats to your safety and welfare in the world, and it's necessary to take steps to protect yourself. However, our imaginations can easily magnify the size and likelihood of the threat, and there are plenty of people out there more than willing to help your imagination along, either to make more money or to gain more power. They want you afraid. The problem is that whereas fear was once an appropriate response to an immediate and obvious threat, that's not always the case today, and that can be debilitating. I personally suffer quite a lot from anxiety, and it's usually related to the most trivial and unimportant situations. That's my neurosis, and I have to deal with that. Oddly, though, I don't fear many of the things that I'm supposed to fear. Oddly, I don't generally feel unsafe in the world. That doesn't prevent me from taking what I consider to be reasonable steps to protect myself, but being afraid wouldn't help at all. It would just add an additional unnecessary burden that I could live without, thanks.